Here is Immortal Moments for explanation. Friends, like videos and subscribes to our channel. Tales of Herding Gods Episode 112 Explanation. So let's start our explanation. Right and wrong. Nikue, so what if you escaped to great ruins? The youth had his hands behind his back and looked at the other divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace attacking the woman protecting the little girl. With a calm expression, he said, "You guys have already lost, and True Heaven Palace now belongs to the you. Don't blame me for being heartless. There's a good saying in Middle-earth, if the roots are not removed during weeding, the weeds will grow back up when the winds of spring begin to blow. True Heaven Palace no longer belongs to your Xiong family. Their current place was considered to be the remains of Great Ruins West Heaven Palace, so the practitioners of True Heaven Palace had to be careful in executing their divine arts here. What they cultivated was the idea that all things had souls and spirits. Mountains had mountain spirits, water had water spirits, grass, trees, and wild beasts had their own spirits as well, with no one being an exception. There was nothing that couldn't become a divine art. Because of that, they naturally had sharp senses in regards to nature, and in the remains of Great Ruins West Heaven Temple, they could feel the danger. Everything here contained immense power, as if there were ancient gods lying asleep somewhere below. Their divine arts could awaken all things in the world to fight for them, but if they awakened the gods in this land, they would only bring great danger upon themselves. The power of West Heaven Palace wasn't a power they could control. Therefore, they had to be careful not to stir up this imposing but for the time being, lying dormant power. Luckily, they had all refined their own spirit weapons. They were different from the spirit weapons of Eternal Peace Empire's divine arts practitioners, however. Most of them were in the shapes of grasses, trees, mountains, flowing water, and white clouds. There were also strange beasts that had been refined into spirit weapons by them, so after they activated their vital chi, the bodies of the tiny strange beasts would swell up by 10,000 times and swallow living humans, which was very unusual. Thus, even if these people couldn't use their divine arts, they could easily get rid of the couple escapees. With one of the plum blossom deers dead and the other one heavily injured, the woman would have to protect her child by herself. She wouldn't be able to move and avoid their attacks, only able to stand there and hold on against their beating. The woman vomited blood and collapsed on the ground, yet she soon crawled upward to her feet to continue protecting the little girl. Traitor! The man flew up and revealed his true form, transforming into a huge buck to face the attacks from the crowd while shouting sternly, "Palace Master had treated you guys well, yet you guys took the chance when Palace Master passed away to rebel. Where's your conscience? Why are you still being so ruthless?" Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, countless attacks landed on his body, and he was killed up in the sky. Before he died, though, he tried his best to swing his huge antlers out to stab at the youth. The abilities of the two deers were extremely brilliant, not in any way inferior to those of the dragon Qin. It was only a pity that there were too many people on the other side and they could only meet with such a miserable end. Over a dozen divine arts practitioners rose into the sky and grabbed onto the branches of the antlers. The dozen or so people landed on the ground, yet they still couldn't stop the force from the swing of the antlers and were pushed back. The soil and rocks under their feet overturned, and the antlers continued to crash towards their target. The youth was unmoved and sneered, "Xiong family has dominated True Heaven Palace for so many years that it should be time to give up the position of the Palace Master. Blood must be seen when killing a person and weeds must be uprooted. If your Xiong family isn't extinguished, our Yu family will have to worry about you guys making a comeback." In front of him, a puppet-sized strange beast suddenly swelled up and gave a world-shaking roar as it beat its chest with both of its hands. It grabbed the antlers that were crashing over with both of its hands, and the antlers came to a stop. Ba thump. The corpse of the buck landed beside the doe. The youth laughed and said, "Kill Nikue and the little princess so we can go back and finish our mission." The divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace walked up, and their spirit weapons flew into the air. The woman gave them a dark look and turned to hug the little girl in her arms while saying in a gentle voice, "Little darling, it's going to be fast. Mom, can we meet Grandpa and Grandma?" The woman's heart trembled. "We can. What about Dad?" The little girl's eyes were sparkling as she asked. The woman shed tears when she said, "We will meet him." The little girl calmly consoled the young married woman, "Mom, I'm not scared, so you don't cry either. I miss Grandpa and Grandma. Before Dad died, he looked so scary, covered in blood, he made me cry from shock, but I think he will be smiling when we see him later." Whoosh! The spirit weapons transformed into spirit trees and strange beasts in the sky, then pounced at them. But just as they were about to land on them, a ray of light flashed by and Qin Mu appeared in front of the mother and daughter. When he spread out his arms, the embroidered gown on his body automatically flew out in front of him. The youth gave a smack with his palm on the embroidered gown, and Qin Mu's arm swirled. The embroidered gown rotated, becoming larger and larger, transforming into a gown that had a radius of over 30 yards. The spirit weapons of True Heaven Palace crashed into this embroidered gown and got wrapped up, after which they vanished along with the gown. Afterward, 300 yards away from them, countless sword lights shone as 8,000 swords moved in unison, slashing the spirit weapons and the embroidered gown into pieces. The divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace were astonished as they lost their connection to their spirit weapons. Among them, there was no lack of strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm whose spirit weapons were extremely powerful. Yet even these were sliced into pieces. Everyone wanted to move forward to attack, but the youth hurriedly stopped them and probed, "Dao friend, these are the family matters of our True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu felt his heart in pain as he thought about his embroidered gown. It had been bribed by him from Incense Master Chu and Venomous Insect Hall Master in Secret Waters Pass. Ever since it was tailored, it had saved Qin Mu from harm several times. Furthermore, his teleportation formation markings were imprinted on that embroidered gown. Now that it had been destroyed along with the spirit weapons of True Heaven Palace's strong practitioners by his sword-treading mountains and rivers, how could his heart not be pained? "I should have known there would be nothing good from doing good. What a great loss." Qin Mu squeezed out a smile. "How do I address this little brother? You Buchuan of True Heaven Palace's you family." The young master was full of smiles, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring wind. He said, "Dao friend must have felt pity when seeing an orphan with a widowed mother, therefore, you wanted to save them. However, you don't know that this mother and daughter have done much evil, killing countless people in their daily lives. Our West Earth's True Heaven Palace place righteousness before family, so I was ordered to lead everyone to come and annihilate them." Qin Mu nodded solemnly. "So I see. I'm the one being reckless, may brother you pardon me." That youth Yu Buchuan smiled. "One who does not know is not guilty. May senior brother please give us face and let us finish this difficult mission. To kill these two rebels, we have already lost countless brothers." Qin Mu put on a righteous face and said, "Your matters are of course important, but I can't just take your word for it. I still need to ask them if they are like what you have said." Yu Buchuan smiled with a pleasant look on his face. "Dao friend, I've already given you a ladder to step down, so don't fail to appreciate my kindness." Qin Mu also smiled with a pleasant expression. Heavenly Devil Cult Master doesn't need anyone to give him a ladder to step down. If it's truly like what you have said, I'll just turn and leave, and you guys can continue to deal with your traitors. If no need for that. Yu Buchuan raised his hand and instructed those to his left and his right, kill him and finish the mission. Understood. Most of the Qi refiners acknowledged the command in unison and leaped towards Qin Mu. He laughed loudly and turned around to run after picking up the mother and daughter. One of the strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm shouted out angrily, "Can you even run?" A towering tree appeared behind him, its roots like coiling green dragons. This was his primordial spirit. The cultivation method of West Earth's True Heaven Palace was also different from that of Eternal Peace Empire. The primordial spirits of Eternal Peace Empire's strong practitioners were usually split into Green Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. Once someone cultivated to Celestial Being Realm, their primordial spirit would appear behind them and usually be one of the 4 great spirit bodies after God transformation, which was similar to the 4 kinds of stone statues in Disabled Elderly Village. Even if there was a difference, it wouldn't be a huge one, since they all belonged to the 4 major types. The primordial spirits of True Heaven Palace's strong practitioners were peculiar. Even though that strong practitioner on celestial being realm belonged to the green dragon bloodline, his primordial spirit looked like a tree, which was rarely seen. The roots and branches of the huge tree flailed like green dragons dancing in the sky, spreading towards Qin Mu's back. Their speed was extremely fast, and rays of green lights flashed across the sky. Even though Qin Mu was carrying 2 people, his movements were extremely fast. Like flickering lights and passing shadows, his speed surpassed the speed of sound and exploded with a thunderclap. Cripple's heaven-pilfering divine legs was considered to be the #1 movement skill in the whole world, but Qin Mu was still on 6 directions realm and couldn't execute it to Cripple's standard. Furthermore, the abilities of the strong practitioners on celestial being realm were simply too strong. The roots caught up to Qin Mu in a blink of an eye and stabbed towards the back of his heart. Yet at that moment, sword lights burst forth once again in the surroundings, and the 8,000 swords rose up like a storm again, instantly unscrolling a picture of mountains and rivers behind Qin Mu. Endless sounds of collision rang out as the swords slashed at the roots and branches that were trying to pass through. The power of sword picture was extraordinary, and in addition to that, Qin Mu's swords were all made from the best materials. Because of that, there were quite some roots and branches of the divine tree primordial spirit that got chopped off. However, celestial being realm was still celestial being realm. The divine tree primordial spirit crashed over with a world-shaking rumble. Sword picture instantly crumbled, and the 8,000 swords flew off in all directions. Fatty dragon! Qin Mu shouted out loudly. The dragon Qilin came sprinting over from the front, but even though his speed was very fast, his speech was very slow. Cult Master, you've created trouble again. The body of the dragon Qilin became larger and larger until it collided with the divine tree primordial spirit. True fire blazed around his body, and the flames with extremely high temperature burned down the divine tree primordial spirit. The celestial being realm's strong practitioner immediately called back his primordial spirit, and a burly man wearing a lined jacket rushed forth with heavy footsteps. Behind him, a rock giant appeared, which was his mountain god primordial spirit that had boundless strength. With a punch, he sent the dragon Qilin flying. The dragon Qilin tumbled back in midair. Because he was too fat, he couldn't help when he couldn't control the fire clouds, thus he immediately pulled himself into a ball and shouted out, "Fu brothers!" The 2 white bats flapped their wings to fly over and let out silent sound waves from their mouths. Those sound waves turned the pursuers into a complete mess. The dragon Qilin crashed onto the ground and pulled out his head before shaking it. He roared in anger, "I had called you guys to catch me." The 2 white bats flew around nimbly to avoid the attacks from below, until they grabbed 2 guys and went to hang upside down on a tree, hugging their victims to drink their blood. Yet the tree ended up transforming as it was the primordial spirit of another strong practitioner, binding the 2 white bats securely. Qin Mu took out a huge white bone hammer and shook it gently. In an instant, countless skulls came out from the eyes, ears, mouth, and nose of the white skull, filling the entire sky. The skulls squeaked weirdly and pounced forth, shuttling among the crowd and biting whoever they found before tunneling into their bodies. The dragon Qilin rushed over again and spewed out blazing true fire towards the green tree primordial spirit, saving the 2 white bats. Yu Buchuan saw the situation and immediately shouted out, "Retreat! We can't execute our skills here, we'll have to fight them outside." The strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace quickly fell back and vanished, leaving behind a mess. Qin Mu frowned slightly. This youth called Yu Buchuan was a ruthless character, and his decisions were firm, without any hesitation. Such an outstanding youth was rarely seen in the current times. A very outstanding youth. Qin Mu rather admired him as he placed the mother and daughter down. The dragon Qilin walked over and grumbled, "Cult Master, haven't you caused trouble? Now that we antagonized these people, if they decide to fight with us outside the basin, they can just transform any mountain into a mountain giant and crush us to death. This is Great Ruins, not West Earth," Qin Mu said while shaking his head. "To fight with me in my territory? They won't even know how they died. Besides, the bond between the mother and the daughter has moved me. If I didn't act straightforwardly, wouldn't it be considered heresy?" The dragon Qilin stared at him blankly. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, This was a good way to summarize the great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Furthermore, the next sentence was, "That's the meaning of path." This was the path. This then is Heavenly Saint Cult Master, the dragon Qin sighed ruefully in his heart. He didn't understand Qin Mu's actions, but every move and action he took was according to the teachings of Heavenly Saint Cult. To act straightforwardly, to be free from nature, that's the meaning of path. Qin Mu had already achieved this step and started to walk on his own path. No wonder the young patriarch had chosen him as the next cult master and no one else. It was also no wonder that the whole master and elders of Heavenly Devil cult were willing to accept him. Qin Mu checked the injuries of the young woman and asked, "This lady, what exactly is your background? Why are the people of West Earth's true heaven palace after your lives?" The young woman was holding onto her last breath when she raised her head up. "I'm the Nai Kuei of True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu turned around and asked the dragon Qin, "What's the meaning of Nai Kuei?" Nai Kuei means Princess Mother. The women are the ones in charge of the family in West Earth's True Heaven Palace, having visiting marriage with the men. At night there would be a banquet, and after the songs and dances, if both sides take a liking to each other, they will go to the woman's house to consummate, the dragon Qin explained. The next morning, the man must leave. This would happen a few more times, the man and woman spending a few nights together until the woman gets pregnant, giving birth and raising the child. The child would then usually know their mother but not their father. Patriarch had gone for a visiting marriage there before, that old degenerate. Qin Mu gave him a stare. "Don't talk bad about Patriarch. Say the important stuff." The young Patriarch had an extremely high image in his heart. Even though he looked like a young man that was about the same age as him, he was a flawless person to Qin Mu and couldn't be tainted. Patriarch was a casual and dissolute old degenerate before, wearing the outfits of different tribes to flirt everywhere in West Earth. And he didn't even have to take responsibility. That old degenerate was so happy that his buttocks jolted here and there. The dragon Qin then saw that Qin Mu wasn't pleased and immediately changed the topic. The mistress of True Heaven Palace also needs to go through visiting marriage. If the palace master of True Heaven Palace is pregnant or has a child, if the child is a female, she will be the princess and the next successor. If it is a male, the child will be let out of the palace. The True Heaven Palace master that has a child will be called Princess Mother or Nai Kuei in the language of West Earth. The abilities of Nai Kuei are usually extremely strong. After all, the technique they cultivate is all things have spirit, all things have soul. Women are usually stronger than men in the attainments of this field. Qin Mu squatted down and took out silver needles to stab into the woman's body. He asked curiously, "Since you're True Heaven Palace master, the mistress of True Heaven Palace, how did you land into such a state? Aren't you an expert on Divine Bridge Realm?" He then took out some spirit herbs and applied medicine according to the symptoms, refining spirit pills to cure her injuries. "Don't waste your efforts." The woman shook her head. "My injuries are already incurable. If my cultivation was still with me, I wouldn't have landed in this state. I was poisoned by Mu Inxue, the most well-known poison maker. The poison she used on me is called coiling silk." The dragon Qin chuckled. "Don't worry, if Cult Master doesn't want you to die, not even Earth Count can take your soul away." Qin Mu's hand techniques changed as he skillfully refined the spirit pills while shaking his head. "Don't brag, be a little more humble. My medical expertise isn't the number 1 in the world, I'm only number 2. As for poison, at most number 3 in the world. Little Poison King, that guy, is still stronger than me by a little." The young woman felt herself become more comfortable under Qin Mu's treatment and was bewildered. She said, "My mother was the palace master. After she passed away, True Heaven Palace elected me as the successor. My cultivation realm was somewhat okay, so I could succeed with difficulty. However, an unforeseen event happened at the succession ceremony. I was poisoned by Mu Inxue and my cultivation was reduced to nothing. The same happened to everyone in our Xiong family. Yu family then took this chance to eradicate my Xiong family. I could only bring my daughter away." Qin Mu refined the medicinal energy while sighing ruefully. "There's something wrong with how your True Heaven Palace manages things. The young woman was slightly angered and asked, "What is wrong with the way we manage things?" Qin Mu fused the medicinal energy and gathered it into a pill. There are 3 big sacred grounds in eternal peace: Great Thunderclap Monastery, Tao Sect, and my Heavenly Saint cult. I'm the cult master, and when I succeeded as such, I was only on 5 elements realm, yet no one rebelled against me. The new Tao master Lin Xian of Tao Sect has a cultivation realm similar to mine, yet no one in Tao Sect had rebelled and dethroned him. When old Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery left, the seat of Rulai is empty, but everyone is still living together in harmony, no one fighting one another to snatch the seat of Rulai. My Heavenly Saint cult is sometimes called Heavenly Devil cult in eternal peace, but even if we are fiendish, our inheritance is still in order. Comparing that to your true heaven palace, you guys are inferior. That's why I said that there's something wrong with the way you guys manage things. The young woman stared at him blankly. She wanted to retort, but she really couldn't find a way to do it. Qin Mu pinched open her mouth and fed her a spirit pill. His 2 fingers slid down her throat, and the vital qi on his fingertips brought the spirit pill all the way to her abdomen. With a few flicks, he catalyzed the medicinal energy of the spirit pill. His sleeves fluttered, and the young woman floated upward. As his 10 fingers danced around, he tapped countless times on her body, refining all the medicinal energy inside her body. When he stopped, the young woman landed on the ground. She staggered, but her internal injuries were already healing rapidly. Qin Mu turned around to look at the little girl, who was adorable. She looked 4 to 5 years old and had 2 small braids. On her body were numerous gold, silver, and jade accessories, and they were all pretty good spirit weapons. He examined her and saw that she had only suffered some superficial wounds. She wasn't badly wounded and just need to apply some dragon saliva. "Little sister, what's your name?" Qin Mu asked. The little girl blinked her shiny black eyes and said in a loud and clear voice, "Xiong Chia. My mom is called Xiong Xiu." Qin Mu smiled. "Your mom is True Heaven Palace's master, so I can't call her by her name, I can only call her Palace Master. On the other hand, I can call you Chia. My name is Qin Mu." The young woman Xiong Xiu immediately said, "Greet Uncle Qin." Qin Mu's expression instantly blackened, and he said to Xiong Xiu, "I'm only 15 years old, calling me big brother is fine." Xiong Xiu said with a troubled expression, "Big brother Qin." Qin Mu immediately said, "I said to let Chia call me big brother, not you." Xiong Xiu's face immediately turned beet red. Qin Mu laughed out loud and made her stretch out her hand. He pricked her finger and took a drop of blood. Once he spread his hands apart, the drop of blood instantly swelled up by 10,000 times and transformed into a huge blood cell. Formation markings appeared in Qin Mu's pupils and transformed into cyan heaven's eyes. After examining the cell in detail, he said, "So it's a poison that affects the vital qi, but doesn't do much damage to the body. Palace Master, pardon me, I'm going to enter your body and check your divine treasures." Xiong Xiu wanted to say something, but before she could, Qin Mu transformed into a black shadow and entered the heart of her brows. Xiong Xiu instantly felt the heart of her brows swell up, then the area of her heart, as if there was a tiny human tunneling to and fro in her body. Qin Mu checked all the way from spirit embryo divine treasure to celestial being divine treasure. When he came to life and death divine treasure, he couldn't help being astonished. It was actually open. Could she be a great expert on life and death realm? He transformed into a black shadow and entered Xiong Xiu's divine bridge divine treasure, and his heart trembled violently. The divine bridge divine treasure of this woman was actually open. I saved a female expert on the cult master level, and she actually called me big brother. Qin Mu became slightly giddy, but he composed himself before leaving Xiong Xiu's body. It was no wonder that she could become the palace master of a big sacred ground when she was in existence on divine bridge realm. Xiong Xiu felt the abnormal feeling in her body vanish and immediately asked, "Cult Master Qin, the poison in my body. The poison has already entered your divine treasures through the circulation of your vital qi, tainting your divine treasures." Qin Mu calculated for a moment, then said, "If you had immediately closed off your divine treasures, the poison wouldn't have gone in so deeply and would be easy to remove. But now that it has entered the divine treasures, there will be some difficulty in refining it away. Xiong Xiu looked grey. Mu Yingxia's coiling silk's poison is unrivaled in the world. The longer I drag it out, the more exhausted will my vital qi become and my cultivation will drop even lower. Not long after that, I'm afraid I will become useless. Unrivaled in the world? Qin Mu smiled and said, I only dare to call myself number 3 in the world in regards to poison, so how could she dare to call herself number 1? Don't worry, I can help you suppress the toxicity so this poison won't continue to exhaust your cultivation. However, I don't have enough spirit herbs, so I will need to gather some. A thread of hope rose up in Xiong Xiu's heart. She struggled to get up while holding her daughter's hand. Cult Master Qin, thank you very much. What I said yesterday was speaking and doing anything in a crisis, so I purposely tried to agitate Cult Master Qin. Qin Mu waved his hand, not minding it. He smiled. Righteous person? I'm not one. Truth be told, my reputation isn't good in the eyes of the righteous path in Eternal Peace Empire. If you told them that Cult Master Qin of Heavenly Saint Cult is a righteous person, they would laugh their heads off. He picked Xiong Xia up and placed her on the Dragon Chiline's back. Let's go. Xiong Xiu immediately said, You Buchuan and the rest. This is Great Ruins and not West Earth, Qin Mu said leisurely. Coming to Great Ruins means coming to my home. There, they can forget about playing any tricks. Xiong Xiu felt worried but could only follow after him. When she thought of it, it was quite weird that during the time she had been talking to him, her injuries had become much better and her footsteps also gradually felt lighter. When they walked out of the basin, her injuries had already healed. Qin Mu in the meantime looked around for spirit herbs. Whenever he saw some, he would go to pluck them. On the way out of the basin, he actually gathered hundreds of spirit herbs. As he plucked them, he refined them as well. Xiong Xiu was bewildered at the sight of it. Qin Mu had refined dozens of herbs, but he had stuffed all of them into his Daotai sack, so she didn't know what medicine he had refined. They came to a hill zone, and Qin Mu frowned slightly. There were verdant hills and limpid water, creating a pleasant scenery. There was actually no traces of strange beasts nor even little birds. Something's wrong. At this moment, they heard songs coming from ahead of them. The voices of the singers were charming and gentle, tugging at the heartstrings. Qin Mu threw a glance at the 2 white bats, and they immediately flew forward, toward the place from which the voices came. After a moment, the white bats flew back and said, There's a lake ahead of you, and there are many naked girls bathing there. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Many girls are bathing? What's so interesting bathing in the wilderness? Wait a minute, I've met girls bathing in the wilderness before. He was suddenly reminded of an incident and couldn't help shuddering. He muttered, It couldn't be that old demon, right? Impossible, it couldn't survive so long in Great Ruins. I must be worrying too much. But to be careful, let's take a roundabout way. Suddenly, a loud voice came from behind. Dao friend, it's a small world, eh? Qin Mu turned his head back and saw Yu Buchuan leading all the divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace over to kill them at an extremely fast speed. Those divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace cast their spells as they ran, and huge trees uprooted themselves, transforming into tree giants that sprinted forward with wide steps. At the same time, the ground trembled as mountain rocks rolled forward at a rapid speed, gathering together to form rock giants. Even the hill under Qin Mu's feet was trembling, the soil started to roll down. The mountain rocks in the hill rose up into a taller and taller structure until a hill giant was gradually formed. Looks like I can only rush forward. Hope it's not that old demon. Qin Mu gave a command, and the Dragon Chiline immediately sprinted forward. The hill beneath their feet had already stood up, and the fire clouds under the Dragon Chiline's feet blazed as he ran frantically down the arm of the hill giant. The giant turned its body and swung the other huge arm toward them. The Dragon Chiline leaped into the sky, and a world-shattering rumble rang out behind them. The 2 arms of the hill giant smashed together and broke, which resulted in countless rocks flying away in all directions. Qin Mu turned his head back to take a look and saw that the moment the rocks landed on the ground, they tumbled back at the body of the hill giant as if they had grown legs. Not much later, the two arms grew back. Palace Master, the ultimate arts of your true heaven palace are indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. Xiu gathered her remaining magic power, and her palm smashed backward before rising. Instantly, a miserable shriek came from the hill giant's body. Green rays flew out the hill that formed the giant, and it vanished without a trace. The giant then also crumbled down, and huge rocks rolled away, returning to the shape of a hill. This spell is remarkable. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, and he asked, "Can you teach me?" Xiu hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You're the benefactor of us, mother and daughter. If you want to learn, I will naturally teach you." Qin Mu smiled and said, "I won't learn from you for nothing. True Heaven Palace is the sacred ground of West Earth, so I will also take out the legacy technique of a sacred ground to exchange with you. But let's leave this place first." While the dragon Qilin sprinted forward, the two white bats circled around, releasing sound waves to hit the experts of True Heaven Palace. "Fatty dragon, faster, faster!" The bats hurried the dragon Qilin. "Shut up!" The dragon Qilin went into a fury and shouted back, "I'm already doing my best." Blazing flames came from his body that grew larger and larger, transforming in 120 yards behemoth. When he sprinted, he was as fast as lightning. In a few breaths' time, he crossed the mountain in front of them and came to the lake where the white bats said numerous girls were bathing. This lake was extremely clear, like a transparent jewel embedded within the mountains. From above, the bottom of the lake, which was dozens of yards deep, could be seen. There were no water plants or fish there. The lake was unimaginably clean. Trees were surrounding the huge lake in an orderly manner, while white cloths and pants hung on their branches. On the ground, there were embroidered shoes with white soles and brightly colored peonies at the front. The sounds of girls laughing and playing in the lake reached the group, along with melodious songs. It was as if this place was a paradise in the mortal world. The dragon Qilin barged into this place and got shocked. He didn't dare to break the serene atmosphere here, so he shouted out loudly, "Maidens in the lake, come to shore quickly." "Ah!" The girls in the lake all cried out in astonishment when they saw this behemoth barging in, while some of the more daring ones raised their fair arms and chuckled. "Big fella, come down and play." Qin Mu looked at the girls in the lake, and his face turned ashen. He hurried the dragon Qilin, "Fatty dragon, it's indeed that old demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge. Go quickly, go, we have to go around it." He wasn't scared of you, Buchuan and the rest, but he was scared of that root demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge, the old demon that Heavenly Saint cult had suppressed for a long time. The old demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge. The dragon Qilin jumped in shock, and all the dragon scales on his body stood up, nearly pricking Xiongqia's feet. He immediately went around the lake and sprinted frantically in a straight line, his speed far surpassing what it was before. The mountain ridge behind them rumbled in the meantime, and mountain rocks flew in all directions. They came tumbling down from the top of the mountain, and it was obvious that it was Yu Buchuan leading the experts of True Heaven Palace to transform this mountain into a giant to attack them. This mountain was much higher than the hill before, so if it transformed into a giant, it would be quite easy for it to catch up to the group. At that moment, the elegant mountain suddenly crumbled and countless white skeletons rolled out from within it. Among them, there were both beast and human skeletons that piled up into a mountain of their own. There were so many of them that nearly the entire mountain had been hollowed out to hide them. This sight made Yu Buchuan and the rest who were in the back flabbergasted. What thing could eat so many people and strange beasts? Yu Buchuan couldn't bother to think about it though and said sternly, "There are spirits in bones, so execute the secret arts to kill Nai Kuei." Everyone cast their spells, and countless bones crawled rapidly to form a white giant that was as tall as a mountain and which strode toward the lake for the shortest path toward the group. Yu Buchuan and the rest rose into the sky and landed on the white bone giant. Some women that were bathing in the lake couldn't avoid the giant's feet in time and got crushed to death. Yu Buchuan and the rest controlled the white bone giant to cross the lake in the chase after the dragon Qilin, who was sprinting frantically around the shore. At this moment, the water of the lake churned as several hundred women flew out into midair. Behind them were pitch-black tentacles, and they all shrieked in unison, "Heavenly Saint Cult Master! Pack, pack, pack!" Loud snapping sounds rang out continuously as the white-boned giant got entrapped by the pitch-black tentacles. With a tight squeeze, the giant crumbled into pieces and countless shattered bones flew off in all directions. Over a dozen divine arts practitioners on 6 directions realm couldn't avoid them due to their low cultivation and got pierced through and fell into the water. Those with a slightly stronger cultivation also didn't have it easy defending against the shattered bones that came shooting over, each and every one of them vomiting blood from the impact. When divine arts practitioners that fell into the water tried to struggle out, the water of the lake started to bubble as countless pitch-black things that were like huge pythons swam over and coiled around them to pull them to the bottom of the lake. Yu Buchuan and the rest were dumbstruck. They hurriedly flew into the air to escape the lake. The peaceful scenery had suddenly become incomparably bustling. Naked women with tentacles kept coming from the lake and grabbing people to drag them into the depths. Some people immediately executed the divine arts of True Heaven Palace to try to control these strange roots. True Heaven Palace believed in all things having spirits and souls, so their divine arts could control all things no matter if they had life or not. All things could be controlled to transform into offensive attacks. Yet when they encountered such strange roots, their divine arts were completely useless. Over a dozen people got caught by the women on the roots, their life and death unknown as they got dragged into the lake. Heavenly Saint Cult Master, I finally found you. Yu Buchuan and the rest finally flew out of the huge lake and landed on the ground. Before they could even catch their breaths, they saw the huge trees on the shore uproot themselves and run frantically in the direction the dragon Qin had escaped. Yu Buchuan and the rest were startled and immediately began to run as well. The few strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace that were on Celestial Being Realm immediately unleashed their primordial spirits to execute their divine arts and withstand the attacks of the huge trees. After running for 100 miles away, they finally escaped the attacking range of the weird trees and roots. Everyone let out sighs of relief and slowed down their pace. If they traveled at a steady pace, they wouldn't feel tired even if they covered 1,000 miles, but when they escaped with all their might, 100 miles was enough for them to be out of breath. The dragon Qin also slowed down his pace as he panted heavily. He wasn't too far away from them. We should have escaped. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and said, the distance that the roots of this root demon can cover is merely 100 miles or so. Wait a minute. His expression became grim when he examined his surroundings. He saw that the vegetation was dense here and the trees created shade. This kind of forest was commonly seen, but as they passed through it, Qin Mu saw plants he'd never seen before. They were large flowers that were the height of a human, their tender buds closed up, but standing tall and upright. 2 large leaves grew on the sides of each stalk. Even though Qin Mu had learned medicinal knowledge from apothecary and could distinguish all kinds of plants and spirit herbs, he had never seen this kind of weird flowers. Yu Buchuan and the rest also barged into this flower forest and frowned when they saw the situation. However, they didn't stop chasing after Qin Mu and the others. Suddenly, a huge flower leisurely sprouted its stamens and its bud whirled as the petals slowly opened up. The color of those white petals gradually became darker, turning from light pink to pink before turning to bright red. When the flower completely bloomed, the maiden kneeling in the middle of it slowly rose and looked at Qin Mu, giving off a miserable shriek. Heavenly Saint Cult Master, your Heavenly Saint Cult has made me so miserable. In the flower forest, the huge flowers bloomed one after another, and in the center of every one of them stood a maiden that looked as charming as jade. They all looked at Qin Mu and screeched, so miserable. Qin Mu's scalp started to crawl, and he hurried the dragon Qin, fatty dragon, set them on fire. Fu brothers, use your sound waves to attack. The dragon Qin spewed flames from his mouth while true fire also surrounded his body. The 2 white bats flew into the air and spat out sound waves. Qin Mu, in the meantime, executed Carefree Sword, and the divine sword swooped to and fro like lightning, slicing the roots that were attached to the buttocks of the women pouncing over. At this time, any other treasure sword would have been useless. Only this divine sword could defend against the roots of Lonely Mountain Ridge root demon. But if it was the true body of the old demon, Qin Mu wasn't certain that even Carefree Sword could defend against it. The cultivation of this old demon seems to have improved, he said with worry. Whoosh! Countless maidens rose into the air, carrying the flowers and leaves to attack the people that had stepped into their forest. A divine arts practitioner of true heaven palace executed a jade tree, and 1,000 roots and branches of the jade tree attacked the maiden, only to see the petals and leaves wrapped around her tightly. That divine arts practitioner was delighted and used the roots and branches of the jade tree to coil around her. However, the flower bud was slippery and escaped with a pop. A stamen then pierced through the head of that divine arts practitioner. Yu Buchuan's expression changed drastically, and he shouted out, "Sacred treasure, please." The strange beast that looked like a violent ape with horns and was only a foot long jumped off his shoulder and beat its chest with its fists. Its body grew larger and larger before the creature opened its mouth to roar loudly. A treasure overflowing with green light then came out from its mouth. What the strange beast had spat out from its mouth was a bead that gave off a green glow. It lit up the surroundings with a lush green shine. However, it wasn't the bead that was glowing, but what inside, which looked like a green dragon swimming around. It was the rays of this green dragon that lit up the surroundings. Xiong Xiu saw the green light, and her complexion changed slightly. She hurriedly turned her head. The green dragon bead of my true heaven palace. Qin Mu turned his head and saw that the perimeter the bead covered had already reached 3 yards. The green dragon in the bead had also become much clearer as it swam happily. The maidens in the flowers that had pounced at Yu Buchuan and the rest got hit by the light, and they lignified, turning into wooden sculptures. With their bodies stiff, they paused in midair. Popping sounds came from them, and green sprouts soon popped out from the lignified bodies. Branches then sprouted out, decorating their hosts with lush flora. The tentacles that were the roots of the root demon had become hardwood and couldn't move at all. Yu Buchuan led everyone forward as the violent ape strange beast with horns on its head followed closely with the bead held high up. Where the rays of the bead shone, the maidens in the flowers were frozen in all kinds of weird poses, without any two being the same. Green dragon bead. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. This bead was a remarkable treasure to actually be able to counter monsters such as the root demon. The sacred treasure of my true heaven palace has been snatched by them. Xiong Xiu sneered and stretched her hand out. The strange beast felt that the green dragon bead flew up and couldn't help becoming astonished. It hurriedly jumped onto it, trying to press it down. The celestial being realm's strong practitioners beside Yu Buchuan also burst forth with their vital chi to grab the green dragon bead, fighting with Xiong Xiu. The green dragon bead then floated in midair, with the two sides in a temporarily into deadlock as they both wanted to control the sacred treasure. The two white bats immediately changed direction and circled around in the air. Countless fine hairs shot out toward Yu Buchuan and the rest as they tried to help snatch the treasured bead. In the blink of an eye, the two white bats' hairs had fallen off cleanly. They had been refined into unusual treasures and were like needles. If they hit flesh, those fine hairs would become abnormally soft, tunneling into the body and taking their host's life in an instant. The dragon Qilin trembled his body, and the scales on his body that were akin to an incomparably sharp shield whooshed through the air as they sliced toward Yu Buchuan and the rest. The dragon Qilin was instantly but naked, having only some Qilin hair at the tip of his dragon tail and big head. Xiong Xiu's face lost color, and she immediately said, "Don't make a move." Before her voice even fell, the fine hairs of the two white bats were touched by the green light of the green dragon beam. It immediately lignified them and all of them fell to the ground. The two white bats wanted to call back their fine hairs, but they lost their connection with them. The two brothers stared with wide eyes at this situation and hugged their shoulders, at a loss. The dragon scales of the dragon Qilin also lignified, turning into wooden shields that dropped onto the floor. The fat dragon was also struck dumb, and his big belly fell to the ground. There had been scales covering it before, so it didn't hang down too much. However, without the scales, the flabs hung down uncontrollably. Cult Master. The dragon Qilin was at a loss and immediately turned to look at Qin Mu, who was on his back. Qin Mu had originally planned to unleash his 8,000 swords over, but after seeing the situation he abandoned that idea. The green dragon bead of true heaven palace was strange beyond conjecture. Even though the dragon Qilin's cultivation was not yet at celestial being realm, his strength was no different when compared to those on celestial being realm. His skin and flesh were also very thick. Back at the Battle of Heaven Wave City, when Duqian Devil King had descended and fought fiercely with the Dragon King, the aftermath of the collision had scraped the Dragon Chilean's butt, but had only broken the scales, causing no heavy injuries to the Dragon Chilean. This showed how strong was the defense of the dragon scales. The abilities of the two white bats were even stronger since they definitely reached the peak of celestial being realm. They would also not use the fine hairs on their bodies recklessly. None of them would have ever expected that their treasures would lignify and lose control just by encountering the green light from the green dragon bead. If Qin Mu's 8,000 swords flew over, Carefree Sword would probably be the only one that wouldn't lignify. The other swords would all turn into wood. Xiong Xiu grunted as her magic power could no longer fight against Yu Buchuan and the rest. The green dragon bead was about to fly over to Yu Buchuan and the rest when the ground suddenly trembled and countless roots poured out from underground, filling the sky. The roots formed a huge pitch-black wooden callus which wrapped around the green dragon bead before pulling it underground. Xiong Xiu and Yu Buchuan were caught off guard and both sides couldn't pull back the green dragon bead in time, letting that root demon snatch it away. Yu Buchuan said sternly, "Green dragon bead is the treasure of my true heaven palace and sealed inside it is a true soul of a green dragon. This old demon won't be able to swallow it." Suddenly, the ground trembled even more violently, and everyone had a hard time keeping their footing. The ground shook non-stop and was actually rising upward as if there was a behemoth below. Boom! The soil and rocks flew in all directions as vegetation flooded out from underground, lifting them up higher and higher. The Dragon Chilean immediately leaped to one side, and a tree crown with a radius of several hectares flooded out, brushing past their bodies. The two white bats hurriedly flew up before remembering that their bodies were still bare. They then immediately used their two hands to cover their lower parts. This caused them to fall straight down and head first into the dense tree. The two white bats were slightly stunned. They saw that the tree was still growing frantically, the tree crown getting larger and larger. The trunk was also becoming taller and taller, therefore, not long later, the white clouds floated past by the tree crown. The air became cooler and cooler while the sunlight became more and more intense. The two white bats found it difficult to breathe and immediately flew down from the tree crown. This flight was a long journey down as the tree crown was actually incomparably huge and thick. Even though their speed was very fast, they still spent quite some time flying out. Below them was a head-spinning height. Out of the foliage, they saw an incomparably thick tree that was much taller than the mountains around it. The two white bats immediately flew down, but only saw the ground after a while. Rumbling sounds kept coming from the huge tree in the meantime, and every once in a while, countless branches would grow out frantically to form a second, third, and fourth tree crown. The two white bats avoided obstacles repeatedly. At one point, lightning crackled in midair, striking here and there. Rain then slowly started pattering down. When the two white bats landed on the ground, they immediately covered their lower bodies and turned to look around. They didn't see Qin Mu and the rest, only a majestic trunk that was like a mountain blocking their vision. The ground split continuously as roots that were as thick as dragons pushed through. They crackled and spread into the distance. Even some mountains that were far away got tangled by the roots until they were sealed tight. By then, the sunlight was completely covered, so there wasn't much light. The Fu brothers flew onto the trunk and climbed the tree rapidly, searching for Qin Mu and the rest. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the bottom layer of the tree crown and fibrous roots came hanging down from the tree crown. They swung to and fro with huge flower buds. This should be the original body of the root demon, right? Qin Mu said. Fu Yuqiu and Fu Yuchen hurriedly crawled over where they heard his voice and only let out sighs of relief when they saw him, the Dragon Chilean, and the rest. They leaped off from the trunk of the tree and used their wings to cover their bodies. Qin Mu raised his head to look at the transformed root demon and was ineffably astonished. He went forward to peel open a huge flower bud hanging down. Inside it, there was a maiden hanging motionlessly with her arms dangling. This maiden opened her eyes weakly and took a look at Qin Mu, saying with a weak breath, "Heavenly Saint Cult Master." Qin Mu closed the maiden's eyes, but she opened them again to stare at him fiercely. Qin Mu went to open other flower buds, and inside all of them were maidens hanging upside down. They were the strange things that Lonely Mountain Ridge Root Demon had born and weren't independent life forms. These girls were just a part of the Root Demon's body. The Root Demon was just a bunch of roots that had absorbed the blood of a god and devil to become a great demon. It didn't have a trunk, but now that it had absorbed the energy of Green Dragon Bead and grew its trunk, it will only be even more terrifying. Qin Mu was worried. Let us leave this place as soon as possible. The White Bat brothers saw that there was some of their hair on the floor which was no longer in their lignified state and were delighted. They trembled their bodies and pulled their hair back. Noticing it, the dragon Qilin swayed his body and the scales that had returned to normal flew back as well. Xiongxiu shook her head. In the Green Dragon Bead there was a true soul of a green dragon, and this great demon won't be able to absorb it. It's most likely controlled by the energy in Green Dragon Bead and can't move. As long as we find the Green Dragon Bead that it had swallowed, we will be able to turn the tables and kill Yu Buchuan with his rebels. Xiongxia was curious. Mom, if we take out the Green Dragon Bead, will this root demon come back to life? Xiongxiu shuddered. Now that the Green Dragon Bead was suppressing the root demon, if they took it, the root demon would recover its mobility and they would be in danger once again. Suddenly, a voice spoke. Young master, the Green Dragon Bead is here. Qin Mu's expression changed drastically. Crap! We can't let them dig out the Green Dragon Bead. They looked toward the source of the voice and saw Yu Buchuan and the rest of the strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace looking at a piece of trunk. It was glowing with a lush green color, just like jade, lighting up an area of a hectare. It was obvious that Lonely Mountain Ridge Root Demon had swallowed the Green Dragon Bead, and the terrifying energy within it had instantly lignified it, causing the trunk to grow out from the roots and pressing them down. The roots had also turned stiff and were unable to move. Don't take out the Green Dragon Bead. If you do it, the great demon will regain its mobility and none of us will live. After saying this, Yu Buchuan looked toward Qin Mu and the rest. He frowned slightly while the people beside him waited while protecting him. Qin Mu smiled. Fellow senior brothers, how do you do? Can you still use the divine arts of True Heaven Palace here? If you can't, I can only send all of you on your way. Yu Buchuan's body suddenly flashed and came to the origin of the green light. He stretched his hand and reached into the trunk of the tree with a sneer. Heavenly Saint Cult Master, if I'm to die, we will all die together. Such fragrance, what's this smell? Just as he said this, the world started spinning for him and he collapsed. The smell of lost fragrance, Qin Mu answered while beaming. Thud, thud. The people of True Heaven Palace collapsed to the ground, with only the 3 experts of Celestial Being Realm able to barely endure it. However, their faces were all flushed and with lost fragrance suppressing their cultivation, there wasn't much magic power they could mobilize. Suddenly, there was the voice of a woman, and she was speaking while laughing. Lost fragrance, it's a kind of anesthetic, right? Let me take a whiff. Xiongxiu's expression changed drastically, while the 3 strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm were delighted. Poisoner. Mu Yingxue. Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and saw a black-clothed woman with gold and silver accessories and a jade bead crown on her head. When she walked past the women hanging from the branches, they would wither and turn into a pile of ashes. Qin Mu took out a jade bottle and threw it over with a smile. It's an anesthetic, take a whiff and see. This video is end here. Like the video and subscribe to my channel.